Warm Johar to the viewers of Jharkhand Vidhan Sabha TV. Today we have a very special guest with us. She is Mary F. Girard, and I know her personally not just because as a good friend, but as a very ardent field worker, a researcher. And she has a great passion for research, especially for the Adivasi research, Adivasi issues, Adivasi history, Adivasi folklore, and many more. Today we welcome you again in the land of forest, which is called as Jharkhand. Welcome, Mary. So, having given the brief introduction, I would request Mary to elaborate on her research experiences, also a little about her past, a past that calls for a tale a century ago. Mary.
So actually, I'm a independent scholar. I was just telling them that I had started my scholarship actually after retiring. So, but I graduated from the University of Wisconsin in Madison, that's north of Chicago, and I maintained my connection to the South Asian Studies department there, doing research on my own and studying it, as my career was in nonprofit organizations. And so I knew about a lot of things about India, but the very unique thing about India is you can never stop learning about India. There's so many things to learn. Um, so that is my personal history, but I became interested in my family history, my ancestors. I have 4 ancestors before me who lived in India. 3 ancestors who were born in India. And so, but our family knew very little about the first ancestor. The first ancestor, his name was Ferdinand Hahn, and he came from Germany to Ranchi in 1868.
Wow.
And so then he was involved in establishing the GEL church. But then he moved to Lohardaga. And Lohardaga, as you know, is predominantly Kuruk. So he studied the language. He had to be able to speak to the people. He had to be able to communicate to them. So he learned Kuruk. He was very good at picking up languages, unlike myself. However, he picked up Kuruk, and he would go from village to village, and he would hear their stories. Over time, he became familiar. He started establishing a grammar, and he eventually published the grammar of the Kuruk language, and which is still referenced to this day, as far as I know. And since nothing is written in Kuruk, he decided that he would write down the folk tales that he had heard. And these folk tales, I would say, the biggest problem with his recording of the folk tales is he never told where he heard something and who was telling it. So now people can read the Kuruk. It's written in Roman script, the stories. In fact, I think you always have been reading it to your children. But people will find that, oh, that's not how we say it, or that's not. And so I became very interested in folklore. So I applied for a Fulbright scholarship, Fulbright Nehru scholarship, and came to Jharkhand to study Adivasi, specifically Kuruk folk tales. And I was incredibly interested in how folk tales become adapted over time. The folk tales that maybe my ancestor heard, yes, they're going to be very different from the folk tales that are told today. Because just as the world changes, we also change. So each community changes over time. So that's kind of my background. We can talk some more about other things that I've become involved with.
Okay, so it was good to know that perhaps you are one of the elder members who are getting a scholarship, Fulbright Nehru scholarship to study. And as I recall, you ventured into exploring the history of the Kuruk speakers, the Uraus. and you visited Rohtas. So, how was your entire experience visiting the Rohtas and meeting people and getting around people in and out Ranchi?
Okay, so initially I was interviewing various people of all different ages, and and I was talking to them about which folk tales were prominent. So Rotasgar, the folk tale about Rotasgar, the legend of Rotasgar, uh, was always the top one on people's list. And so I said, because it's a story of origin, and those kind of stories are always the most important to people and their identity. So, so then when I came to Ranchi, I tried to gather as many people, filmmakers, activists, academics, storytellers, as many people that I had met. I invited them all to come together to just talk about this one thing, one story. And then I was invited by a filmmaker, Deepak Bara, to go to Rotas because he did some filming there while we were there. And it was perhaps the hottest day of that year in the middle of August. So, so I had hoped that many people would join us to come, but of course people didn't want to experience the heat. And yeah, it was very challenging for me to experience it also. But yeah, so I went to Rotasgar. It was fascinating, and I was the whole time I'm trying to figure this out because Rotasgar is a big fort. And I'm saying, how is it possible that the Adivasi people were able to establish this fort? So this is why I became interested in that particular story and gathered people together to discuss it. And I learned so much, and I'm hoping that they also learned a lot.
One more thing, when you talk about Ferdinand Han, he was amongst the first to pen down the folk tales of the Uraus. So I think you are the fourth generations, and I think there is genetics. Sometimes we call it social genetics. You two got engaged into research among Adivasis. So when we talk about folk tales or folklores among the Adivasis, what importance does it hold for you? Like, why is it important to study the folk tales or the folklores, especially among the oral tradition holders who are the Adivasis or these kind of communities?
So I wrote the book, a biography of Ferdinand Han. And to do that, I went to many, many different archives that were online. I just stayed in my home in the US, but I was studying seeing archives from Germany and throughout the US. And so I was learning about my ancestor through archives, written archives. So when I began to start thinking, well, how would an Adivasi person learn about their ancestors? And I realized that it's only through their folklore. That is the thing that gets, and I want to just say folklore includes folk tales, but also the different cultural elements of society, of the community. So how they eat, how they drink, what they think, what they believe, all these things are part of folklore.
So, Mary, in our recent discussion, we came across one book written by Samuel Dani, uh, the discourse of the subaltern folk tales and folk history. So, what is your take on that? Like he tries to portray that the folk tales and folklore are just not mere some songs or some stories, but it is for the voice of voiceless. How do you take the entire narrative by the Samuel Dani?
Well, that's why I passed it on to you, because I was impressed with the fact that he was saying we really need to look at this differently. We need to understand that folk tales are not something that they're myths, or there's elements of truth in every folk tale. And so I felt that he was bringing that out in his book. I just want to say an interesting thing about Samuel Dani is he's from Kariyar, Odisha, and my grandparents were there. His grandfather was my grandparents' cook. So we are always very amused by the fact that here now, 3 generations later, we are coming together and we're doing a history of that area around Karyar. So that's just an aside from, but so anyways, yes, the whole concept of how we look at folklore, that no, it's not truth, it's not facts, but it tells us the story of the people, and as you said, it expresses the voice of the people, and so that's why it's so important, because in history we only look at the written words that have been written throughout history, and usually only of the powerful. And so it is the only way that we can access the reality of the more marginalized and oppressed peoples, is by learning their folklore, understanding how they view themselves and how they view
And
their
their
history.
perspective as well. How do they look themselves through their own lenses? Right.
Through their own lens, and what their history looks like to them. So you can have, I mean, there are historians. There's Dalton, who did the history of Adivasis in this area. But the question is how do they perceive themselves? I mean, there's a difference between how others perceive you and how you perceive yourself. And so they have the right to express to us, the outsiders. I'm counting myself as an outsider. And to express to us what is important to them, what is significant for them. What does Jal Jungle Jameen
mean to them?
And to get their perspective rather than to impose our perspective on them.
Okay. Mary, in anthropology, usually we call this an emic approach, where we try to decipher and understand the Adivasis' perspective through their own lenses. So, emic approach now it's like much in vogue. This is kind of deconstructing the colonization of anthropological thoughts in this post-colonial era. So, having said that, since we were both part of a recent workshop organized by Indiana University and the University of North Texas just last week, so we were talking about archiving the Adivasi history through folklore. So, how important do you think archiving these kind of folklore before they are lost forever is important for academics, for the Adivasi society as well?
Because I think society has changed so much and is actually in rapid change right now with AI coming in and so much development, that the old ways of doing things has changed. I mean, I don't care who you are. You most probably are tired if you're a young person, you're tired of hearing your grandparents tell their stories. Because you're used to fast media, instant media. And the stories come out slowly and
with warmth and love, care.
Right, yes, and it's so important how a story is told, with what medium, and because you can sing a story, or you can tell a story, or you can even act a story. And so these things need to be captured, because now we're living in the age of media and data. And this is data. These stories are data. They're stories that they will tell us about the people, the Adivasi people. So we need to preserve them. And so there can be an oral archive just as much, just as vibrant as the written archives are.
So actually, Mary, when we talk about the folklore or the folk tales, of especially about the Adivasis, at times, there is a question of being subjective. Like if there is some story told, some myths delivered to the younger generations, or even this comes to the mainstream society, mainstream academia, at times, there is a question about its subjectivity, and people question the objectivity of it. How true the myth is, how fact, what significance does it hold. So there is a very thin balance, I think, between being subjective or being objective when we talk about myths or folklores. But yes, when we are being judgmental, someone being an outsider, I think we need to understand also from the perspective of the society what they think and why it is so important. Having said that, Mary, since you have been here for almost in and out for 2 years, what is your perception regarding the Adivasi youth as particularly, or with the Adivasi community, how eager they are in preserving their folk tales or the oral tradition? What is your study?
Yes. So while I was interviewing various people, the elders would always say, the young people are not interested anymore. But then when I would speak to the young people, students especially who are at the university, so they're a particular kind of young person, I would notice that they were very zealous to know and understand who they are, where they fit in society, and what values and have been passed on to them. Because in university, all of a sudden they start to realize, my culture isn't bad. I mean, maybe when they were growing up in school and such, they felt like they were being pushed down. And so maybe let's not talk about our culture. But then they're realizing, the culture has so many good values and so many good things to learn that we need to preserve it. The other thing about youth, young people, that before I came here to do the Fulbright scholarship, I went on YouTube and I found video after video after video in Kuruk and Munda and all and Sadri and everything. And there were young people who were trying to take their culture and make it make sense to them.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that the elders don't like that. It's like, no, we need to preserve our traditions the way they were done. But I think the only way for it to move on and is by adapting it to modern situations. So, for instance, at that conference, there were several women from the Northeast, and they were dressed in their beautiful attire. So, but they had, high heels and they were very delicate. And I was like, surely that's not how you dress in the village. And they said, no, this is our modern dress. This is how we have adapted our fashion. So young people are adapting fashion, even here in Jharkhand. They're adapting fashion, they're adapting music, they're adapting storytelling. Films are coming up that tell an Adivasi story, such as Humans in the Loop.
Yes, beautiful film by Biju Topo.
Yes. So, so this is why I feel so hopeful for the youth of Jharkhand, the Adivasi youth, to be able to maintain their culture. But still, a lot of work needs to be done in that area.
Mary, this was a general perspective when we talked about tribal youth. I think you must have met quite many young research scholars. And what is your perspective on especially on the academia part, like the youth who are engaged into research? So you must have a bit of discussions with them. So what is your perception regarding their own identity? And when you said this, now they don't shy off with their identity, they speak out loud, yes, we are Adivasis or we are tribals. So how do you perceive this that the consciousness of their Adivasiyat or their identity among the research scholars?
So I think I would say that when they're talking to me, they were very confident. Perhaps when they are in their classroom or when they're speaking to their professor, they're still very nervous about whether they can take a stand for their identity. And so that part I don't know. I didn't experience observing that. But I think there is, I mean, there is an increase that even the government supports of tribal issues, preserving tribal languages, all the different tribal languages throughout, which is up in the 2000s, right? The different languages of India. And so the government wishes to have people preserve their mother tongue. Yes. So I think that it's hopeful and promising that the next generation will get the support that they need to do the research that they want to do, describe that hopefully will be Adivasi oriented, because and also I'm really intrigued with how we can change how research is done in an Adivasi way. So, for instance, this workshop that we had on Rotas, we had it at an academic setting. So the rows were all lined up like, everybody's sitting in a row and relying on the experts to speak. But I wanted to break that down. It would have been nice if we could have made the room into a circle and have us speak in a circle, and that there is no one who is the expert. We're all experts when it comes to our own culture. So, these are the kinds of things that I'm hoping will start infiltrating into academia.
So, Mary, there is a kind of a recent concept which there is concept of native scholars. So this is quite aligned. I think I can draw from your statement that a new approach can be established, a new methodology could be built up, where the Adivasis have to build on a methodology so that the research becomes very effective and very meaningful. So, Mary, any final remarks? We are at the end of our interview, a very meaningful one. Yes. Anything which you would like to at the end of our interview? Any message to the youth?
Yes. So, discover what is important in your culture. The fact of the matter is that we are having a crisis of global warming. We're having nature be destroyed. And whether you know it or not, you as an Adivasi young person have been taught or have experienced through your family relationships, being relationships to the village. You've experienced how we are all tied to nature. And so to be partners with nature, this is a very Adivasi thing, and it's a very necessary thing for the world today. So to sustain the world in the future, we need to kind of go back to some of the old values of understanding our relationship to nature. So that's one major reason you should never feel embarrassed about your culture, because it's actually could be what saves the world. So
थैंक यू सो मच. तो ये थी मैरी जिराड, और इन्होंने अपने रिसर्च के बारे में साझा किया, अपने यात्रा के बारे में बतलाया, किस प्रकार से ये रिटायरमेंट के बाद भी रिसर्च में लगी हुई है. निश्चित ही हम सबों के लिए एक बहुत बड़ी प्रेरणा स्रोत हैं कि यदि आपके मन में, आपके जहन में कुछ पैशन हो कुछ करने का, तो उम्र कभी बाधा नहीं होती है. और इन्होंने उसको बखूबी बताया कि आज 7 समुंदर पार देश के वापस आके झारखंड में रिसर्च करी, उरांव लोगों के बीच में, जिनको हम लोग कुड़खर कहते हैं, उनके बीच उनके इतिहास को जानने की कोशिश करें. तो मुझे लगता है यहाँ के लोगों के लिए भी एक बड़ा संदेश है. ये समझना होगा कि जब इतने दूर से लोग आके आपके बारे में रुचि ले रहे हैं, तो कहीं ना कहीं समाज का भी दायित्व बनता है, इन युवाओं का भी दायित्व बनता है, समाज के लोगों का दायित्व बनता है कि वो भी अपने लिए सोचे, अपने अस्तित्व के लिए सोचे, अपनी पहचान के लिए सोचे. तो आप सभी दर्शकों का बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद, विशेष रूप से विधानसभा अध्यक्ष माननीय श्री रविनाथ महतो जी का, और बाकी झारखंड विधानसभा टीम की, जिन्होंने हमें ये अवसर प्रदान किया कि हम एक दूरदेशाई मेहमान से रूबरू हो सके, उनसे बात कर सके. आप सबको पुनः जोहार.